for my after work swim. Let's set up the camera and go in and do some body surfing. I've got a doctor's appointment shortly, so I'll have to wrap it up pretty soon to get ready for my appointment. It's going to be a phone appointment. Put the camera here. Kind of a cold, blustery day. Indian summer has passed. Alright, that's good enough. Hi, Cyan Man. Oh, how far have I swam out before? Long ways out. Well, far enough out that the boats that are passing between me and the shore. That was a long ways out. The diary, which the booksellers had advertised so prominently, turned out to be no more than a register of everyday transactions, interspersed with reflections and resolutions, collected in a variety of little books, folded and stitched together, which does not sound at all like the 2 quarto volumes containing a full, fair, and most particular account of his life, which Boswell had sampled back in 1776. Had they been the same, then perhaps, presumably, Boswell would have recognized them. Perhaps, therefore, Boswell was correct in his belief that the diaries had been delved into. The diaries he had delved into had been destroyed by Johnson. Ones that Johnson destroyed 3 days before his death. The meeting between the two rivals was surprisingly cordial. Hawkins congratulated Boswell on his punctuality, and then remarked, "You are a recorder of Carlyle, sir." Flattered, Boswell replied, "I have that honor, sir." Hawkins then presented Boswell with his pamphlet, "A Charge to the Grand Jury of Middlesex." Boswell thanked him and asked him to inscribe it. Hawkins gladly agreed and took up his pen, pausing to ask if he should address it to James Boswell, Esquire. Boswell smiled, or, in your own style, Mr. James Boswell, a native of Scotland. Perhaps a little embarrassed, Hawkins replied, "There is no occasion for that." They parted on amicable terms. Boswell reflected how much enmity might have lessened if men who fought with their pens at a distance would meet calmly face to face. He decided that he would spare Hawkins many of the critical strictures he had planned to make in the life. At about the same date, he received a letter from Temple, who had read Hawkins' book and both of Mrs. Piozzi's. Publication of Mrs. Piozzi's letters had stimulated a further rash of newspaper paragraphs chiding Boswell for his dilatoriness. "Certainly everything now has appeared that can be of any use," Temple told Boswell, "and if not interrupted by the business of your profession, you can have no excuse for not going forward with your great work." Chapter 10. Bereavement. The sad apprehension of losing my valuable friend, whose good sense and kindness had so long been my comfort, shocked me sadly. Even now, Boswell found it difficult to concentrate on his book. In the week following the arrival of Temple's letter, for example, he wrote not a single line. He was still dreaming of making a mark in the world, of getting into Parliament, and of becoming a great man. "I own I am desirous that my life should tell," he admitted to Temple. Boswell was indignant when Pitt took no notice of him during a chance encounter with Dundas in a parliamentary ante-room. Dundas was friendly enough, but Pitt, who was by his side, was cold and stiff and proud. Could it be that the Prime Minister had failed to recognize him? Boswell was consoled by Langdon, who reminded him that the two of them were both gentlemen from ancient families. "Don't we know that he was, the other day, Will Pratt at Cyril's coffee house, and are we to be awed by him who have lived with Johnson?" On Saturday, the 26th of April, 1788, Boswell attended the annual exhibition dinner at the Royal Academy, where he exchanged a few words with the Lord Chancellor. Afterwards, he confessed to Malone that he was tortured to see those who had risen to high situation while I was nothing, particularly those Scotsmen who had prospered at the English bar. But I trusted that my being so tortured was a sign that I was made for something great. and that it would come. Malone humored his unrealistic hopes because he believed that Boswell needed to be in London to write his book. But he deplored Boswell's drinking so much, and following a night when Boswell had been unable to remember how he found his way home, Malone lectured me upon my intemperance and on my delaying Johnson's life, on which I was to rest my fame. Margaret Boswell was once again very ill, so emaciated indeed that she found it difficult to sit up in bed. While Boswell had been away from Lonsdale, she had been attended by Sir George Baker, president of the Royal College of Physicians. His fees, a guinea a day, were alarmingly expensive, and Margaret formed the impression that her husband grudged the expense. Anxious to prove her wrong, Boswell was for calling for the doctor even when he was not needed, and had to be dissuaded from doing so. Sir George told Boswell that his wife had an inflammation on her lungs, which would soon have killed a younger person. As it was, her condition might be alleviated, but it was incurable. He prescribed laudanum and bleeding at regular intervals. "Oh, Mr. Boswell, I fear I'm dying," poor Margaret sighed one afternoon. Normally uncomplaining, she confessed her fear of death. "I am terrified for the dark passage." The two of them had been married 20 years. For more than half that time, Boswell had been aware that Margaret was likely to die early, leaving him alone. The thought filled him with dread, but he could not help wondering what might happen afterwards. As early as 1777, Boswell had begun to dream of marrying a rich widow, perhaps Lady Jean Lindsay, who had married the much older Earl of Eglinton while still in her teens. She died in 1778 at the age of only 21. Such unworthy speculation was accompanied by feelings of shame and self-reproach. Though he felt guilty at leaving his wife at such a time, he found that he could not rest at home and dined out more often than not, frequently returning late, often the worse for drink. After one lively evening, Boswell and Courtney decided it was a pity to go to bed and walked up to Hampstead at dawn, as dawn was breaking, crossing to Highgate, where they ate breakfast, so that it was 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning when he finally returned home. Margaret had been so anxious about him that she had become feverish and was spitting blood. At last, after further hesitation, Boswell decided that she must return to Auchinleck for the sake of her health, and that he and most of the children should accompany her. The house in Great Queen Street was given up. In mid-May, the Boswell family left London, leaving behind only their eldest child, Veronica, in a fashionable Queen Square boarding school. Because of Margaret's illness, they traveled slowly. At various stages, it seemed uncertain whether she would be able to continue. They reached Auchinleck on the 21st of May. There Margaret began to recover, influenced both by the cleaner country air and by the comfort of being at home again, in the country of her childhood, among old and valued friends. Boswell took with him to Scotland his journals for the years 1783 and 1784, planning to finish the first draft of his book there, before embarking on the northern circuit for the summer session. But as soon as he arrived in Auchinleck, a number of distractions intervened to prevent him from making progress. "I have now been here a fortnight and must acknowledge that I have done very little to advance the life," he admitted to Malone. There were visitors to be entertained, and there was a great variety of estate business to be attended to, particularly since this was the time of the year when rents were due. Political canvassing provided a further distraction. Boswell had counted himself as a candidate for Ayrshire ever since the last election, and he nursed the hope that if the nominal and fictitious votes were abolished before the next, the same votes that had done so much on Lonsdale's behalf to maintain across the border, he might stand a chance of being elected as an independent. For this reason, he was riding the country, meeting and being civil and agreeable to as many voters as possible. Not such a daunting task as it might appear, there were only around 100 real voters in Ayrshire. Ayrshire. A month later, he was forced to confess to Malone, "You will be very angry that he had written. You will be very angry that he had written not a page of his book since he left for London. Now do not scold me, for I promised to set apart so much time for the life that the rough draft will be all done and brought with me to town early in October." This letter was written from York, where Boswell had joined the Northern Circuit. On his first night, the other barristers had tried to make him serve again as junior. Boswell was so offended that he got up and left the table. The next day, he was relieved to discover that this proposal had been dropped. Nevertheless, he counted as one of the younger and less experienced barristers, and found himself obliged to dine with them while the seniors dined in more important company. The rude hilarity of the younger barristers grated on him. As a penalty for his absence from the circuit, he was required to pay a fine of 2.5 guineas and go through a ceremony of riding backwards on the back of another barrister, representing a ram, reciting a ludicrous poem. "Here I am, riding on a black ram, like a deserter as I am." At Durham, Boswell encountered one of the hazards of literary fame, a fan. Mr. Ambler, the recorder, turned out to be a keen Johnsonian, and he first pleased and then embarrassed Boswell by praising him to the ladies of the local assembly. After 2 days of such flattery, Boswell began to avoid Ambler, especially once the enthusiastic recorder began to address him in broad northern dialects as Bossie. Boswell continued on the circuit, passing through Newcastle at Nawarth Castle, about 10 miles short of Carlisle. He foolishly offered to drink a breastplate of ale, followed by some more hard drinking with the other barristers present. Intoxicated, they mounted their horses and rode into town. Boswell could hardly sit straight, and when he tried to dismount, he tumbled off in a heap. One of Lonsdale's hangers-on supported him to his lodgings. The next morning, he woke with a headache and trembled to think that he had made such an entry to the city where he had been elected recorder. Oh no! Bossie! That evening, he supped with 2 or 3 of the council, and was repelled by their familiarity and petulance and coarseness. He returned to Auchinleck on the 15th of August. He returned to Auchinleck. Wait a minute, where was I? He returned to Auchinleck on the 15th of August, where he found a long letter from Malone full of news, including gossip about the recent Westminster by-election, a reprise of the celebrated Westminster election of 1754. Oh, you know what? I think I need to get ready to go for my doctor to call. I better wrap it up. At the top of the page, anywho. It's not so scary. Yeah, well, it's a little bit scary. I think I'll sign off for now. My doctor's gonna call me in just a minute to talk about my left testicle. What a topic, huh? Can't believe I'm telling you all that. So, surgery might be, well, surgery's already planned out, but I'm having second thoughts about the surgery. Maybe I can get away without it. We'll see. So, he's going to call me up in just a bit, so I better drop off if you're ready for his call. Be safe, but not too safe. Take care.